All right, I think we're live. Let me fix the video a little bit here. All right, can you guys hear me? Let me know in the chat. Hi, I cannot believe that there are people here. This makes me so happy. I can't believe there are people here. You guys know PJ and Mrs. Puckett were here live streaming for the first time ever, and I can't tell you how nervous I was that no one was going to be here. So this is just unbelievable that you guys are here. Thank you so much. We'll be interacting in the chat. I also have a few things here that people have asked me throughout the week that I'll be answering from Reddit and Twitter and everything else. And look at all these amazing people. This is so cool. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. This is awesome. Shout out to anybody who does these live streams on a normal basis, because this is the most nerve-wracking thing I've done in a long time. So you guys are amazing for sure. No intro, no outro. We're just going to jump right into it. You guys can feel free to ask questions in the chat. You can make requests if you want me to hold or play with my dogs or do anything silly. And I'm just happy to be here with you guys. This is so fantastic. I have a helper with this channel that has collected some of these questions for me, so I haven't been able to look at them. So I'll be seeing these for the first time and answering these for the first time too, and I'm really excited to see what they are. It looks like we're still a little bit wonky on the video, so I'm going to try to fix that real quick. All right, I think we're good now. Let's take a look at one of our first questions here and see what we're working with. I have an easy one to start, and that is, what is the most inspired you have ever been? Gosh, I feel like I have not had a lot of inspiration in my life. I try to take small parts here and there, but the most inspired I've ever been was probably when I was 16 years old. I got kicked out of high school for giving a politically driven speech in front of the entire school. There's 2,000 people there, and it's not something I talk a lot about now. People don't follow me for politics. They don't hop on my Twitter to find out political news, and you're certainly not here for me to talk about politics. But I gave this speech right before we invaded Iraq in 2003 and got kicked out of school for it. And the whole thing just kind of blew up and got out of control. It was on CNN. It was in the Washington Post. I was on radio interviews all over the country. It was kind of my 15 minutes of fame, I guess. And this was long before I even met Mr. Puckett. And one of the things I got invited to do was give speeches all over the country. At just 16 years old, I was just a child doing this, and then was able to take part in the largest pre-war rally in American history. And I think maybe that was the most inspired I had ever been. This was before I even had a computer in my home. This was before Google, I would imagine, at that point. I think I was on Ask Jeeves looking up directions at that point, or maybe even MapQuest, I don't know. And I get dropped off at this rally in Washington, D.C., and I'm one of the last people there. I have this VIP pass to interact with everybody who's leading the march and everybody who's on stage, and I got to go on stage and see this sea of 500,000 people out there listening to all the bands that were on stage. And that's where I met Al Sharpton for the first time. I know that he's kind of a polarizing figure nowadays, less so back then in 2003, but I walked up to Al Sharpton as a 16-year-old kid, put my hand out and said, "Hi, I'm Abraham Switters," and he took my hand and he pulled me in and gave me a big hug and said into my ear, "I know who you are." And I think that was probably the most inspired I had ever been, was seeing 500,000 people there all for a common cause, and being able to meet somebody, you know, a political figure like that who knew my name and knew what I had done to be there up on stage was an incredible thing. I'm less political now, by all means. I certainly vote and things like that, but that was the moment that the wide-eyed little Abe was just overwhelmed with joy in a moment that I will never forget. A little bit polarizing. Yeah, Josh, a little bit. Just a little bit. Oh, we even have another Nashville person in here. What's up, Nanya? I love that. And thank you, Andrea. The shirt, I actually do have a website where I sell this shirt, but I'm shutting it all down because it's just been nothing but a pain in my neck. Everything has gone wrong. Every order goes wrong, and it's just the worst setup you could ever imagine. So, Annie Trout, I knew you would be here. I love you. She's always one of the first people to comment on these videos. That's awesome. Jane, yeah, I got kicked out of school for the speech. It was a homecoming rally. So I was captain of the soccer team. I was supposed to go up in front of the whole school and just go, like, go football team, you know, that kind of thing. But instead, I kind of held the captive audience there and gave, it was only a 2-minute speech and it was very respectful. It was just, here's what's going on. Here's the situation. You know, we will mobilize troops. This was in October of 2002. So this was a solid 4 months before we actually did go to war, and just told everybody, you know, there are people out there who don't want this to happen. You know, a lot of you are going to be 18 soon and will be subject, you know, at that time I thought maybe a draft. Obviously it never happened, but it was about to affect everyone. So I basically just told people, if you want to do something about this, that you can contact me and we'll go out and do something about this. But the administration did not care for that too much. Kicked me out of school. A lawyer, we got a lawyer for free. The guy wanted to do it for free, and the ACLU got involved and sued the school, and the whole thing was just an unbelievable mess. I think by the time it finished, I was 17 years old, and yeah, it was an unbelievable mess. But it was an interesting time for a 17-year-old kid, to say the least. Who at that time I was just drinking and smoking weed all the time, and had none of the insights that I have today. It kind of felt like all of that stuff was happening around me, but it was actually happening to me. So a wild ride by all means. Henry, thank you so much. Look at this, is so cool having you guys here. I feel like I want to like start up a fire and have us all tell campfire stories. This is amazing. I love this. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. My God, this is amazing. I have another one here that is, what's a memorable moment from traveling around with the Pucketts? Well, unfortunately, that's not too amazing of an answer. I don't have a vehicle. I think I've said that before on this station. So the Pucketts haven't traveled much. PJ was born here in Nashville. He's never left Nashville. Mrs. Puckett is from Tennessee. She's kind of been in the same maybe 60-mile radius her whole life. And you know, Greyhound buses don't allow dogs. I don't like to fly, so I don't have a lot of traveling experience with them. But with Mr. Puckett the dog, holy cow, we lived all over the country together, and in 2009 we left Seattle and traveled the country for 3 years. Just me and him. Lived out of this small 2-door Saturn. We camped out every night. We'd get a hotel room on Sundays in the fall time so we could watch football, but it was just traveling for 3 years, just me and him. It was the most amazing experience I had ever had. And then we finally settled up on Lake Superior in Michigan. But that dog was probably more traveled than 99% of the dogs in the world. So it's a little interesting now being stuck with these two who have not had any of those experiences. And I echoed, Vikings or Packers? Go Packers. I echoed some of those sentiments to a friend of mine who I met through Discord, who lives maybe about 30 miles north of me, that I've kind of felt stuck recently. I've really felt stuck, and I feel like I'm in a rut. I feel like I'm not progressing. I'm doing the same things every day, and this channel brings me a lot of joy, but besides this, I feel like I don't have a lot. And she didn't even bat an eye. She said, well, I'm going to come get you on Thursday. I'm going to come pick you and the dogs up, and you're going to stay with us for a long weekend. So I'm really excited that next week, not today, but next week, we're going to get out of town for a little while and go stay at her house in this beautiful backyard with trails, and get out of Nashville for a little while. I cannot wait. I don't think that's so much traveling, but it'll be nice to get out of the city for a little while, by all means. Oh, you know, the playlist on Spotify, Catherine, I have just completely forgot about it. I used to do that on the other website with the Wholesome posts maybe once a month. I think I used to update that playlist where there were 20 feel-good, positive songs that I would change out all the time, but I haven't thought about that in forever. So yes, I will go ahead and change that and put it up on Twitter and Reddit and everything. Yeah, it's a good question. I completely forgot about that playlist, completely. All right. Who made that cool intro music to your YouTube? Josh, what's up, man? What's probably my oldest friend in the world is in the chat right now. Say hello to Josh Staffield, who showed up. He is my oldest friend in the world, by all means, and he is the one who made the intro music to my videos. A lot of you had commented about it. Not this past week. That was done by one of the members that I interviewed. He was a member of the band, but every other video it was Josh, and it's the ones that start the 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, he's such an amazing musician. He's an amazing person, and I can't believe he's here. That's awesome. Thank you, Josh. All right, I'm gonna take another question off this list. This was somebody from Reddit that said, I am fascinated with where people came from. Not so much where you were born, but what was your journey to today? I realize that could be a series of videos, but I may be the only person interested. I actually did have an interesting childhood just because we moved so often. We moved every 9 months when I was a kid, it seemed like. I was born in Wisconsin, hence the Go Packers. Now, I'm a Titans fan, but you asked me Vikings or Packers, so I went with the Packers. But I was born in Wisconsin. We moved within a year of being just a baby to Minnesota, and we lived all over Minnesota and Iowa and Michigan, and I never stayed in one place for too long, which was tough for me at a young age, especially struggling with Tourette syndrome, which I've talked about a little bit on these videos, and struggling with acceptance. You know, I never felt like people accepted me because at a young age they didn't. I was that weird kid with the tics who couldn't keep his face still, who had all these Tourette tics that were much worse when I was a child. Some of you have mentioned you haven't noticed any of them in this video, which makes me feel good. But that is a common theme for Tourette syndrome. People often either will lose the majority of their tics by the age of 21, or they've gotten so good at hiding them that people out there will not notice them. But when I was a child, it was out of control. Now, we finally settled down in northern Michigan up on Lake Superior, which is where I know Josh from, the musician. And this beautiful little oasis known as Marquette is 20,000 people maybe. And it's mostly wooded backwoods area up there, but Marquette has all these amazing artists and music and organic food and all these amazing restaurants. It really is an oasis in the middle of nowhere. And we moved there, I think, when I was in 6th grade maybe, and then I actually stayed there until I got out of high school. So I didn't necessarily grow up there, but that's kind of home to me because it was the first place that we had lived for more than a year, and we lived there for a number of years, I guess 6, and I eventually moved back there a few times as well. And I always had these grandiose ideas that I'm going to go back and do all these awesome things in Marquette, but it's such a small town that every time I move back in 9 months, I get a little bored sometimes, and that's not taken away from Marquette at all. That's an Abe problem, not a Marquette problem. But it's a beautiful city. It's just probably better for me to visit rather than to actually live there again. All right. Did you watch the South Park episode where Eric Cartman fakes having Tourette's? Yes. Actually, I made a post about Tourette syndrome on Imager. If you just Google Mr. Puckett Tourette's, it'll show up. I made a post some time ago about it, and it blew up, and somebody asked that, and I had never seen it. I don't know anything about South Park. I'm not against it, but I'm just not a fan. I don't watch it. So the second somebody made that comment, I went and took 24 minutes to watch the video, and I thought it was amazing because they made... there was a lot of embellishment, of course, because it's South Park, but they made some really amazing points in it, and a lot of them I can't remember now or quote, but they really did a good job at personifying what the syndrome is. And I later went on to read that the Tourette Syndrome Association of America gave a kudos to that episode for actually putting knowledge out there about Tourette syndrome, whereas most people, when they hear those two words, they think of somebody swearing uncontrollably, when really less than 5% of people with Tourette's even have vocal tics, and even way less than that percentage have swears. It's just what you see in media, it's what you see in movies, because people get a laugh out of it, but that's not what Tourette's is whatsoever. So I thought they did a really good job with showing what a normal person with Tourette's had, and also being a little silly without being offensive, which is, I think, that's definitely what I thought going in was, well, it's time to get offended. This is what, Matt Parker and Trey Stone are their names, I think, and I was just ready to be offended, but I certainly wasn't. I thought they did a great job. I thought that was a cool episode. My favorite pizza style, Josh asks, Well, I don't eat a ton of pizza just because my pizza style, hi Z-Heart, I'm actually going out for pizza with Z-Heart there in the chat on Friday. I don't eat a ton of pizza because my favorite pizza isn't that available, and that's pesto sauce. I'm not a big fan of marinara, of red sauce. I want pesto, and I want a lot of it. I want you to layer the pesto on there. I want it to be this high, whereas even some of the places that do have a pesto sauce will just kind of sprinkle that on there because it's so heavy in garlic and flavor, they don't want to turn people off. But you get a layer of pesto and then some cheese on there, and then I am pretty picky. I like to have tomatoes on one side, pineapple on the other side, and then spinach and onions on the whole thing. So it's a very specific pizza, and usually when I find it, it's $30, so I don't eat it a ton, but that's my favorite pizza, and one of my favorite meals, really. It's hard to come by. It is. So hopefully Z-Heart and I can find that on Friday night. All right. Yeah, everybody try pesto pizza. It's absolutely amazing. And yeah, that is quite a pizza order, especially doing the half and half, because the tomato half I eat first, and then the pineapple half is basically a dessert for me. So it's kind of it's two meals, or at least two courses of a pizza meal. Somebody asked me on Reddit, they said they had lost their dog recently, and they can barely type about him without tearing up, and they want to know how I coped when Mr. Puckett died. That is probably an easier answer than you'd imagine, unless you might have seen my video about the history of the Pucketts. And if you didn't, you might be surprised to learn how soon I got Mrs. Puckett after Mr. Puckett died. When Mr. Puckett died fairly quickly, from the first symptoms to kind of getting better a little bit, to then falling off the deep end and then dying. All of it happened so fast. And even 24 hours before he died, I thought he was going to be fine. He started looking good again. So it all happened so fast, and I didn't have much time to prepare for it, and I never thought about getting another dog, ever. But when he died, I was just in shock. I was in the middle of nowhere. I was living down in this tiny town in the middle of Tennessee that I didn't like. I didn't have any friends down there. And then once he died, I felt like I had nothing again. I felt like I was out on the street again with nothing. And that's the closest I've been to both drinking and using drugs, and also self-harm in the last 3 years of recovery, was that day, because I knew I couldn't go home. I had nothing left in my tiny apartment because he wasn't there. There was nothing for me to do. So I just walked around town for 4 hours, trying to dissuade myself from walking into a liquor store, or trying to dissuade myself from doing something that would seriously injure or end my own life. And eventually I made it. So far, I was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I couldn't even walk home at that point. So I called an Uber, and instead of going home, I went a totally different direction, and I just wanted to go see some dogs. I just wanted to go to this animal shelter and hang out with some dogs, and I had no plans, even when I got there, to adopt one. And that was until I met Mrs. Puckett. And I walked into this shelter, and all these dogs were just freaking out at the top of their lungs, and she just so matter-of-factly just jumped off her bed and came up and looked at me as if to say, "Oh, you're here now, we can go," like she had been waiting for me the whole time. So I adopted Mrs. Puckett 4 hours after Mr. Puckett died and went home with her, and that's how I coped. Because I didn't have very good coping strategies at that time, and I don't think I do now either, because I haven't experienced a lot of loss in my life. I've lost more than a handful of friends to addiction, but that was also in my own addiction. So I coped with that by using drugs and alcohol. But losing Mr. Puckett, I had no idea what to do. So I coped with losing my dog by getting another dog and just starting the journey right away. Some people think that they desecrate the memory of their dog by doing that, and I just don't think that's true at all. Mr. Puckett wanted me to be happy. Whoever asked that question, your dog wanted you to be happy even after he's gone, even after he passed away. So I would fully suggest, if you don't get another dog, to foster another dog, or to go volunteer at a shelter, or just do something to get that feeling back in your life, because you're also helping somebody. I mean, it seems like a selfish thing, like, oh, I just got another dog right away. But in the grand scheme of things, what did I do? I rescued her, from her own life. So we both benefited in that, and nobody was harmed in doing it. So I fully suggest to everybody that there's no time period that you need to wait between animals. Go out there and rescue another dog. Make some other dog's life as good as you made the one that passed away. All right. Hey, Warren is here. Hey, Warren, what's up, man? I haven't seen you in forever. Oh, man, this is so cool. Warren has daily, weekly workout routine. I don't really have one. It's pretty sporadic, but we end up running 6 days a week. I usually take one off. We've been running a little bit less here just because it's been cold out. Today it was freezing and it was 17-mile-an-hour winds, so it's just not fun doing that. But PJ's up to about 30 miles a week now. He's going to get 35 miles in this week. And Mrs. Puckett she's about 45. She's done 60 and even 65 miles in a week. But again, just the cold weather, I cut them short often just because I'm not having fun out there when the wind's killing my face, so I cut that short. But we usually like to wake up in the morning and run first thing. And I've talked about on this channel quite a bit that when I wake up, I don't like the way I feel. I'm not in a good mood when I wake up. All of my negativity starts the moment I wake up, but my positivity doesn't. So I think about all the terrible things the moment I wake up, but it takes me some time to actually think about positive things, and the running certainly helps that quite a bit, to be able to get my endorphins pumping and not really think. I can turn my mind off when we go for a run because it's something that we do every day. We're very good at it, and even if I don't have a route, we can just go, and sometimes we'll do green light runs where we'll just run, and whatever intersection we're at downtown, whichever way is green, we'll go that way, and we'll just keep doing that all over town until we reach 10 miles or whatever we're running that day. So I think I do a lot better without a schedule. I'm not somebody who sticks to a schedule very well, but we have done good running almost every single day of the week. I like that, Alex, who says, when you're going through hell, keep going. There's always going to be another side to that. All these beautiful comments. I can't tell you guys how scared I was. I cannot tell you how scared I was for this thing. I texted Z-Heart right before this started, and my hands were just shaking. I thought for sure nobody was going to show up to this thing. And then when I first looked in the chat and you guys were talking before I even came here, I had tears in my eyes. Like, I don't know why this was so nerve-wracking for me. I'm perfectly comfortable behind the camera, but I guess I'm so afraid of failure and so afraid that I'm not accepted that I consistently think that every video I put out will have 0 views, and that's especially this live one here. So this is an amazing feeling to be able to sit here with you guys. I'm gonna find another question here. Let's get one from Twitter who said, let's see. If you could mobilize your fans and followers to do one thing collectively, something you haven't already done, what would it be? If I could mobilize my followers, what would it be? Hey, Truebean. That's a good question. I have this overwhelming sense of guilt ever since I left Imager because I feel like I have done nothing good. So on Imager, I had 523 straight posts that went viral, where not one of them got lost in user subs. So I was averaging, 150,000 views a post, so that anything I put out was going to be seen by people. And if you have 150,000 people and 1% of them are going to help, let's say with a supply drive or a fundraiser, that is a large amount of people. Whereas now that I don't have that platform, I average like 3,000 views on a tweet. And 1% of that is a whole lot less. So I have this overwhelming sense of guilt because I haven't done supply drives. I haven't done fundraisers. I feel like I've done nothing good since I left that website, and I'm struggling to think of even what to do in the future. So I certainly have the day picked out, yes, and that's Puckett Day. Some of you have heard me talk about this on Reddit. Puckett Day is February 18th. It's the anniversary of Mr. Puckett's death, which is also the anniversary of the day I got Mrs. Puckett, and it's also PJ's birthday. So we celebrate all three at the same time, and I'd love to be able to mobilize everybody to do something. But I just don't know yet. If we all go out that day and clean up our neighborhoods, or we make it a volunteer day where everybody goes out and volunteer, maybe we find a cause that's worthy for all of us to donate to, even if it's just $1, and we have all these people do it and make a huge difference. I know in the grand scheme of things, I would love to help the homeless community. So whether that would be, getting involved in a nonprofit that can get clothing and items, which may not be as important down here in the South as it certainly was up in Minnesota where I was homeless, but getting items to these people, and also working on things like I have friends in Portland who work on tiny home communities that are specifically for the homeless that people can move into. And I've talked about this on this channel, that my life didn't turn around until I had a place to stay, until I had a couple of months of sobriety and a roof over my head. Because every rehab that I went to, every sober camp that I went to, every single time I got out, I was just right back on the street. I was back, whether I was sleeping in condo developments and trying not to get caught, or I was sleeping in homeless shelters or in the Greyhound station. That was one of my very main issues, was housing. I could not get sober until I had a roof over my head. And I can only imagine that there's a lot of people out there feeling the exact same way. So in the long scheme of things, that's what I would like to do, is help people who are struggling with homelessness. But in the short term, I'm eyeing February 8th, 18th as doing something, but I still have to figure out what that something is. So I think what I'll do is put out on Reddit and Twitter and Discord and every place that we interact, and pose that question to people. What can we do to help on Puckett Day, and how can we be most effective as a community? How do you pronounce GIF? Well, it used to be GIF. It was GIF for so long. It was GIF for so long. And then once I started getting kind of more well known on Imager, which was like 2 years ago this month, I think, I knew I had to turn it into GIF, because that's the popular way. Sarah still says GIF. She's the one that's holding on for dear life over on Imager, but now it's GIF. But when I look at it, when I'm reading it, in my head, it's GIF. So I have to do that mental gymnastic between my brain and my mouth to be able to say GIF. Yeah, or GIF too. That is definitely what I would say if I was in conversation with people 2 years ago. I wouldn't say one or the other, because I figured the other person would just have the other viewpoint. So I would just say, oh, did you see that GIF of the dog, or whatever it was? But especially when I started putting out 20 dog GIFs, and that was the title of one of my most popular series, I had to start saying it with a hard G. So what can you do? All right, let's see if we have any more questions here. I have a really simple question that just says, how are you holding up during this crisis? Which I can only imagine they mean COVID. And that's a weird answer, because I'm holding up well. And I feel a little guilty about that. The whole last year, I had 2 jobs in 2020. I was working as a sales advisor for a financial company in Minnesota, and I was doing that remotely here in Nashville. And then I was also moderating for Imager, which was just a $10 an hour job, like 18 hours a week. So it wasn't paying my bills or anything, but the sales advisor job was. So I was doing very well financially for most of 2020 without ever having to leave my house. And I really felt guilty about that, because I saw all these posts come in and all these tweets and people talking about on Discord of losing their job and having all of these issues. I also have not gotten COVID yet. So I've also been very well off from a medical standpoint, from a health standpoint, that I haven't gotten the virus yet. So financially and health-wise, very good, although that has kind of diminished in a sense. I think it was August, I quit my sales advisor job because I'd saved up a ton of money, and frankly, I hated the job. I really did. I knew it was going to be short-term. And I figured I could just live off this, 15, 20 hours a week at Imager, as long as I kept doing that for so long. But then, of course, what happened at Imager, and I eventually left that, kind of left me high and dry. And I've been living off, I guess, last year's savings up until now, which has been fine, but that is not going to last for as long as it already has. That is not going to last for very long. So I've definitely been looking for a new job. I do have work now. I have part-time work in the morning, but again, it's just like that moderation job. It's not paying my bills. There's no future in it, just like that job. It's a couple of bucks a week to kind of keep me afloat. So that's something I'm definitely dealing with, and to a certain extent struggling with, finding employment, because this is the first time I'm looking for a real job, and now that I have a record. You know, the sales advisor job, I did a lot of that work when I was still not homeless, but in my addiction. So that wasn't getting a new job for me as much as it was just extending my contract with a company I already worked for, and they didn't even background check me. So that was perfectly awesome, you know. But unfortunately now it's been a little more difficult, because even when I do make progress with a job, you have to fill that out or tell them about your criminal history, and I had this thing, you know, this one thing sitting there that just does not look very good at all. And if I could sit down and talk to somebody and get to know them and actually tell them what happened, instead of them just looking at the sheet and seeing that I have a charge, hopefully that'd be a little bit easier to do. But so far it hasn't been, so I'll keep my foot to the pedal and keep going with that, because what else can you do? There have been a number of you who have reached out to see if they can help in any way, whether that's, you know, providing links to their own employment to see if anybody's hiring with them. Yeah, so I appreciate you guys reaching out with everything I've been trying to do there. And I guess I'm still holding up well with the crisis, because I haven't gotten sick, but it's just not as good as it was in 2020, I think would be a wonderful way to put it. All right, what else do we have? What kind of job are you looking for? You know, a little bit of anything. Ideally, now I'm not only looking for this, but ideally it's going to be something working from home. And I think most people could probably relate to that. But it's a good time to be looking for work from home, because all these companies are doing so. I mean, Nordstrom, their corporate office in Seattle is now closing. I lived in Seattle for a long time. I still read the news there. They're closing, and it's one of the biggest fixtures in downtown Seattle. It's this monster building that we walk by every day, but they're closing because they're sending 80% of their workers just to work at home. So it's a good time to do that. My background is in sales and marketing. So anything with that, marketing is a little more easier to do at home, or sales, there's certainly an advertisement part of it that I could do at home as well. So I wouldn't be opposed to really anything, you know. I even just thought about for the first time this morning, while I have all that moderation junk, which really wasn't the worst job in the world. It was so easy to do once you learn the rules, that maybe I should hop on Twitter and see if I can, you know, mod for them for a few hours a week, or even Facebook, because you just sit here with a computer with my dogs, and how cool is that? So maybe I'll look into that and see what I can do. Hey, Bardcrest, what's up, man? Yeah, I do have a record, yeah. So that was at the very end of my addiction, and I was arrested in, God, what was it? I guess about 3 years ago today, like pretty darn close to that. And that's kind of what started my recovery journey, because I sat some time in jail before I finally pled out to a lesser charge. And the reason I was in there was so silly and ridiculous. I mean, the charge was, if I was in 47 other states, I wouldn't even have been in jail. It was just unfortunate where I was. But I wasn't mad about that at the time, because I had done so many terrible things in my addiction that I had never gotten caught for. So it was almost like all those things just kind of led up to this certain point. And even though I went in for something that was silly, I certainly deserved to sit some time, although I didn't really think of it at that time as affecting me as much as it is now while looking for a job. And I think that's a video for the future too, is having a wholesome guy in jail, and not only how terrifying that was at certain points, but also how positive it became the longer I stayed there and the longer I connected with people. And I've talked about some of the correctional officers on this channel and how amazing they were to me, and they've kept in touch. And it was like this horrific experience that turned into a very positive and wholesome one at this jail in the middle of gosh darn nowhere. So that'll be a video for someday, I promise. I'm here for the jail video. Awesome. I made a post on Imager about going to jail, but that was before anybody knew who I was. I don't remember if I kept it up, if it's still there. I'll have to look through my old post to see if it is still there, because I put it out one day, this long post. It took hours doing it, and then it got, you know, like 7 upvotes and 6 downvotes, and like 300 people saw it. So the video will hopefully do a little bit better than that. Oh gosh. What do we have? What's one place you want to travel to, and what do you want to do there? Well, here, I'll move them, Ellen, so butt isn't in your face. Yes, Yasha, I do have a Discord server. I guess if you know me from Twitter or Reddit, I'm guessing, since you're here, just send me a message on there and I will shoot you the link. We've only got maybe about 100 people in there, and that's kind of how I want to keep it. I don't want some huge server full of people, but it's been very nice so far in the channels we have in there and people talking about progress and sharing pictures from their day. It's been very enjoyable so far. I like it. But again, on the question of where I would travel and why, two places I really want to go to are Paris and Italy, and I've already been there. When I was 14, I played on a soccer team that played in tournaments in both Paris and San Marino in Italy. And it was a U18 team. It was this most amazing experience. Probably should have been the most amazing experience of my life, but because of the age I was and my eventual addiction, that's really where I started getting into drugs and alcohol, was on that trip. It was this American team that went over there. And I pretty much looked like this at 14. I was a big dude. I was 6'1", 180 pounds when I was young. I hit puberty early, and I even had some peach fuzz at that time too. So I think the drinking age was 16, but I got let in everywhere. And really all I did when I was there in Paris and San Marino was just party, was just do drugs and drink alcohol. And at that time, I thought it was the coolest trip ever. But now looking back, it's one of the biggest regrets of my life to have that opportunity and squander the whole thing on just partying. So I remember even being in the Louvre, you know, the museum, and like walking past everything, and you can spend days in there looking and learning and everything. And I remember there was a group who basically just like went and saw the Mona Lisa for 30 seconds and then walked out and went and get drunk. Like, it was all this amazing culture and history that I just walked past and didn't pay any mind to. So it's a big regret for me. But I will say I'll probably never fly again. I hate being in airplanes. I have an inner ear problem, so even just sitting in the backseat of a car, I can get very, very ill, and being trapped on an airplane is just terrible. So I may never do that again. So I'd probably say if it's somewhere I can drive to, it's Alaska. Alaska is my final frontier. I was so big into mountain running and climbing and adventuring when I was out in the Cascades and in Colorado and all over the country and even in the desert. So I feel like, you know, going up and trying to get above 14,000 feet, which in America you can only do up in Alaska. Well, I shouldn't say only, because California you can get up. But to be surrounded by mountain ranges, you know, of 20,000 feet, that's definitely a goal of mine, to be in Alaska and to be there for a long time. So I guess the backwoods of Alaska would probably be the one place I'd want to travel to, and just so I could camp out and, you know, maybe even bring the dogs out there, even if they have to be in a sled. I don't know how well that'd work, but it'd be fun to certainly try to get the dogs out to Alaska and run some mountains. They've never been in mountains before, and I haven't been in a number of years. So I definitely would love to get up there at some point. Bardcrest said he cannot find my jail post on Imgur, so it is not on there. Okay. Totally possible I just deleted the whole thing. Where does the name Mr. Puckett come from? Mr. Puckett is my childhood hero. Nobody actually called him Mr. Puckett, though. His name was Kirby Puckett. He's a baseball player for the Minnesota Twins. And unless you really love baseball, you probably didn't hear from him because he wasn't some Derek Jeter type. As good as he wasn't culturally relevant. He didn't do commercials. He didn't play as long as a lot of people play, and he wasn't on the Yankees, so a lot of people didn't know about him since he was on such a small market team there in Minnesota. But growing up, we had season tickets to the Twins, living in Minnesota, and they won the pennant. They won the World Series in 1991 when nobody gave him a chance to do so, and he was a huge part of that. So when my ex-girlfriend and I got Mr. Puckett the dog, his name was Zorro. But he didn't answer to that. He didn't answer to anything, so we were perfectly fine changing his name. And she wanted to name him Kirby. But I thought that was a little too cliche. There's a lot of Kirbys out there, so I said, what about Puckett? And the name on his microchip was actually Puckett. But a couple of years into having him, once we started, will you stop, dude? A couple of years into having him, when he started running and conquering these mountains and doing all this crazy stuff, he started walking kind of strutting around, and he like puffed his chest out and was really confident in himself, and all my friends out in Seattle started to call him Mr. Puckett, and it just stuck. And then when I made, I think Imager, I guess, was probably the first time I used that username. I signed up in 2014, I think, and I was in a homeless shelter when I did sign up, and it asked me for a username, and I hadn't seen Mr. Puckett in a couple of days, and that was the only thing I could think of was just put his name down there. And I never could have dreamed it would have turned into what it is today, or how many people know who Mr. Puckett is, or that you can type Mr. Puckett into Google and all this cool stuff comes up. So I came from a baseball player and turned into so much more, and I'm super happy that it was that instead of something silly, you know, instead of putting like a childish username in and having to stick with that all these years. I'm really glad it was Mr. Puckett. Give that puppy a toy. Actually, how about some treats?
Yeah.
Treats. There you go. All right, let's see. He does it so often that it's like I don't even notice it's happening, you know? Like she will just lay there and be petted forever, and he will chew on my finger forever. It's like it's not even happening anymore. All right, what else do we have? You log so many miles running. This is from Twitter as well. You log so many miles running. What does it bring into your life? Does running feed you, or do you feel it as a chore? Interesting question. It's definitely a chore. I mean, when I wake up in the morning and I'm putting my clothes on to go running, I am not happy at all. We go out and we walk 2 blocks before we pick it up and start running, and I am not happy at all. I am just hating life at that point. But there's this amazing turnaround somewhere, I don't know, 4 or 5, 10 miles, whatever it is, that I start to feel a little bit better, and really it's for the after effect. The running, I don't necessarily love to run as much as I love coming home and how I feel afterwards. And that's even on a day like today. We only ran a couple of miles, but because I've been running every day this week, I feel really good today. So it helps me feel amazing, and that's endorphins, but it's also staying healthy, which we've talked about in the past, how I'm always trying to eat nutrient-dense food and a vegetarian, and it takes a lot of physical actions to be able to feel good emotionally and mentally. So running certainly feeds me, but it's definitely still a chore because it's difficult to start, right? There's this benchmark that you have to clear before it becomes easy, and that's true even now. I mean, we could go out and run 20 miles right now, but still the first 3 or 4 miles, I'm gonna hate it by all means. So it takes a lot of time to get into, and it takes a lot of energy too, but once you get the rewards, I mean, there's no turning back. I'm so hooked on running that I don't think I'll ever stop. I certainly take some breaks. I ran all through my addiction. I've run ultra marathons. I don't know if I've ever spoken about this, a handful of them, but I've never run one sober. So I think that was a goal of mine in 2020 until all the races got canceled with COVID, was to run an ultra marathon sober, because my last races, the 50 miler, the 31 miler, everything that I'd done, I did under the influence and extremely hammered. I mean, my last ultra marathon started at 4:30 in the morning, and I was practically laying down at the start time. Like I couldn't even stand up, and gosh, that was an 18-hour run I was out there for. And the first 6 hours I was still pretty drunk for, and was like kind of goofy and sloppy and like sort of having fun and tripping all over the place. And then the next 6 hours I was hungover and just in absolute hell and in absolute pain. And then the final 6 hours kind of felt normal. And then I finished the race and went and got hammered again. So that was my experience with running for a long time, was doing it drunk. And I can tell you it's a lot easier to do when you're not drunk, especially when you're drinking water, and your muscles will thank you for that. But I'm looking to run my first sober race this year, and I think that'll be very gratifying because I'm a lot faster and I feel a lot better doing it sober. And that probably goes without saying, right? That I can run a little bit faster when I'm sober than when I drink half gallon of gin beforehand. Am I watching any shows or reading anything? I kind of watch the same 3 shows over and over and over again. Now, I'm a huge sports fanatic, and that's something I don't talk about on socials either, because, again, that's not why people follow me. But That's something with Josh Staffield, who we were talking about before, who made the music for the videos. That me and him talk on a daily basis, and that's pretty much all we ever talk about is sports. I saw every second of every football game this year. I watch basketball every single night. I watch soccer every single morning. I'm a huge, huge sports fan. But besides that, I kind of watch the same 3 shows over and over and over. And that's Workaholics, which is a stoner comedy on Comedy Central, and I absolutely love it. I'm not going to defend myself. I think it's a great show. That's The Office, which is one of the most bingeable shows ever, I think. And then another show that's on FX called The League. It was a fantasy football show, but it is I guess a sitcom. So not like about players and things like that. It's just this group of friends who play fantasy football, and it's just this silly, stupid show. But it's something I can have on in the background, and I've seen every episode of these shows. I know what's coming next, so it really calms my anxiety to have something like that on in the background at all times. I don't know. It's just when it's completely silent in this studio, I get this overwhelming sense of anxiety and almost impending doom. So I will almost always have a television on and have one of those 3 things playing, even if I'm working or trying to go to bed, or no matter what I'm doing, one of those 3 shows is probably on in the background. And if somebody lived with me, they'd probably be super annoyed with it. So I'm probably lucky it's just me, because it's the same thing over and over again. Yes, Naomi, exactly. Do you have any, somebody asked, who the F is this man? That's awesome. All right, Kristen asked, do you have any hobbies you don't talk about? And I guess I'd go back to sports with that. I'm a huge fantasy dork. I mean, fantasy basketball, fantasy football, pick'em leagues, things like that, Vegas lines, like most of my hobbies probably are about sports. I love to play music too, as you guys know, but I mean, maybe I'm short on hobbies, because the only things I can think are the running, which I do consider a hobby, the playing music, and then everything to do with sports, for sure. Thanks for being here, Kristen. That's awesome. And Workaholics is amazing. I love it. I'm glad you say that, because sometimes I feel like all 3 of those shows are a guilty pleasure. Not The Office. Everybody watches. Most people watch The Office, but sometimes I feel like The League and Workaholics, I kind of have to defend myself watching them instead of just being able to say, yeah, I like this show. I should be able to be more forthcoming with the things that I enjoy and not be afraid of being judged for them. Josh says I'm a huge Tom Brady fan. Well, Josh, I'm going to kick you out of the chat. I do have the Chiefs winning this weekend. For anybody that's watching the Super Bowl, I'm super excited for the big game. They are 3.5-point favorites, and I think they cover all 3 points. Hey, thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate that, and thank you for being here, man. That's awesome. Warren asked, my most coveted superpower? I would want to fly, for sure, because I think so when I'm in a car, I get car sick unless I'm driving the car. So there's something in my mind that establishes that having the control, I don't get sick with. So I feel like if I could fly, I wouldn't get sick the same way that I do on a plane. And that would allow me to travel, which is what I did for my entire life. I mean, up until 2 years ago, I moved every 9 months and was traveling constantly. And now I don't have a vehicle or resources to travel. And now I feel stuck. I have this circumference around my house of 15 miles that I've never left. And I have no idea what's out there. The Smoky Mountains in Knoxville and Memphis and all these amazing places that I would love to go to. And if I could fly there, let's do it. Oh man, you know what, Bardcrest, you're right. So teleportation, yeah, I forgot that's a thing. That's probably better than flight for somebody that has motion problems. There was this, one of my favorite shows when I was a kid was on Nickelodeon. It was only like 2 years before it got canceled, but it used to be on Stickly in the afternoon, and it was called The Tomorrow People. And they used to be able to teleport from place to place, and it was just the most amazing thing when I was a kid, seeing that and hoping that would come true someday, or that science would create something to help us to be able to do that. And I think I probably figured at that age that by by 2021 that we would have had that by now. But I don't know if teleportation will ever be something. Flying might be more fun. That's definitely true. I just think probably a little bit harder on my motion sickness. All right, let's go with another question here that says, what is something inspiring somebody said to you once that you never forgot? That is, oh God, what is something inspiring somebody said to me once that I never forgot? Well, I think the most inspiring person I ever met, I didn't even know his last name. His name was Jeff. He was my first sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And this guy, he had like 20 years of sobriety, and it, for a kid like me who was just getting involved in the program, and thinking that, at that time I thought people just lied about their sobriety because I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think it was possible to go 30 days, without getting messed up, let alone 30 years like he had. So he was just this like mythological creature to me. I put him up on this incredible pedestal where I would listen to every single thing he said. And I've used his quotes in these videos. One that I've used over and over in these videos is that you can't think your way into a new way of acting. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking. And that's him. I think the most inspiring thing that he said to me, and something that I still deal with this day, was we were working on the 4th and 5th steps. In the 4th step, what you do is you write out all your resentments, right? So you think of every single person that you resent, every single person, place, or thing that you resent, or if you have hate in your heart for them, or even if you just dislike them, you write them all out. And I thought this would be, maybe 5-6 people on a page, but the longer I did this, I ended up in 12-point font, single space, with 16 pages of people, places, and things that I resented. I mean, this was like a chapter of a book, but it was just a list of people. And then what you do in the 4th step is you go through and you find out what you did wrong in all of those situations. So how did I contribute to those resentments? If I thought that this person did me wrong in the past, I need to reevaluate that, because there's probably something I did to create that situation, or at the very least, add to that situation where I felt that I was wronged. So that's a huge one. The 4th step is one of the most action-filled steps. And then in the 5th step, you sit down with your sponsor and you essentially tell them your life story and all these resentments. So I got done with this 5th step. I spent all day with them reading my life story and read every single one of these resentments, and it took hours. And I finished, and I closed my laptop at that time, and he just sat there and looked at me. And I said, Jeff, I'm done. That's it, man. And he said, no, you left somebody off that list. You still have somebody to make amends to. Who did you forget that you have resentments towards, that you still need to make amends to? And I couldn't figure it out, and we went back and forth for a while until he said that it was me. I left myself off that list because I hadn't forgiven myself for my actions in the past. And that was a really powerful thing for me at the time, because I absolutely hated myself, and I still deal with that sometimes, looking at my past, and I have forgiven myself for my own actions. That doesn't mean I don't have regrets, because I do. Holy wow, I have so many regrets, but I don't hate myself anymore. And that was such a huge turning point in my recovery. And I went on to get drunk and relapse 3,000 more times after that. But it was just one of those inspiring things that always stayed with me, because that's the point in my life where I stopped blaming myself, where I stopped being so hard on myself, when I realized that everybody has regrets and everybody has things that they would have done differently, but that's no reason to hate myself. All I can do now is forgive and move forward. And that was a very powerful thing for me to learn. Mr. Puckett was no fixed. Mr. Puckett was fixed, yep. Yes. Dude, do you understand that you just helped 50 people? Well, sometimes, Joshua, I really wonder if I'm getting any points across, because I know sometimes I don't talk in a linear fashion. So I wonder if I'm making any sense. Whereas especially when I'm editing the videos, I can go back and put this part and that part together, or do a million takes until I get it right. I've never actually made a script for this channel ever, but I always have some idea of what I'm gonna say, and if I don't get it across very clearly, I can just scrap that and start over. But when I'm live like this, I wonder if I'm getting a message across. So I appreciate you saying that, man. Doreen asked, mountains or sea? And without a doubt, that's the mountains. Let's go climb, man. Let's go do something cool. I don't like to swim. I got stung by a jellyfish in Honduras. I don't like the water. Let's go to the mountains. Let's go to the mountains all day. Shepard says, I like to make care packages to hand out to the homeless. What are some important items you would include? Recently, I learned socks are really handy to include. Z-Heart, I don't know if you're still here, but my friend Z-Heart right here in Nashville does the same thing. Her and her husband make these packages, and I didn't even know it. Like, they didn't even tell me that until they picked me up, I don't know, 2 weeks ago to go out for pizza, I think. And we're stopped at a stoplight, and there was a homeless person asking for money on the corner, and you just picked one of these gift bags. Gift bag is a wrong word, but you know what I mean, a goodie bag to give to the person. And it had, some dollar bills in there, and it had socks and a toothbrush. And I think toiletries would be the number one thing I would say, because that's something that people don't think about with homeless, that you still need deodorant, you still have to brush your teeth. I mean, there were weeks that went by when I was on the street where I didn't brush my teeth because I couldn't. I didn't have a toothbrush or toothpaste. Socks are a huge one. You already mentioned that yourself. And mittens, depending on where you are in the world, clothing is a huge one. But if you can spring a little bit more, shoes are a huge one too. My father rescued me so many times in my homelessness, I can't even count. But the first time he did it, I was in Seattle, Washington, sleeping in a junkie park, and he flew all the way out from Minneapolis, found me in that park, rented a car, and drove me back to put me in rehab in Minnesota. And it was just one of the most amazing things that anybody could do for somebody else. But I remember when he picked me up, we went and stayed in a hotel, and I took my shoes off, and my feet were just completely torn up. I mean, because I'd had these shoes on for, like 2 months straight without taking them off. They were already crappy as it were, so they were digging into my feet. So socks and shoes would be a huge one too. Now, obviously, that's tough to do if you're just handing out good bags. You don't know what size shoes people are, but it's definitely something I would want to focus on if I were, say, at a homeless shelter and maybe setting up a booth, which a lot of people, especially in churches, did when I was in shelters. They would set up a booth in a homeless shelter, and you could walk by and pick up socks or pick up a toothbrush or whatever. But one thing that nobody ever had were shoes. So that would be one thing I would like to say to that. But yeah, toiletries, by all means. Toiletries are the one thing that everybody needs. And this is something I can't stress enough, but I've just learned it, and that's feminine products. This is obviously for women, and it's something I never thought about when I was homeless, but it's something I've recently learned is such a huge deal for women that are on the street to be able to get pads and tampons and things like that. And it's something that's just not talked about. I feel like that is still almost as taboo as being homeless. We don't talk about, pads and tampons. So to be able to get those to the women who really need them is a huge deal. So the toiletries and pads and tampons would be my suggestion, by all means. Hey, Z-Heart is here. Hey, girl. Awesome. All right. That's true, James. Yeah, helping them be presentable for a job too, and that's something that unfortunately a lot of people look at the homeless, and especially on the internet. Every time I see something on Twitter that's trending, or a huge post by, say, the New York Times that has something to do with homeless people, you'll see 10% of those comments that are just people saying, well, they want to be out there, they want to be homeless. That's their choice. Let them do it, and that's just not right, man. That's not right at all. Now, there might be a small percentage of people who choose that lifestyle, but most of them just don't know where to start. And that was certainly me too. I was out on the street and I didn't know the first step of getting back on my feet, especially somewhere like Minneapolis, which had shelter capacity for about 60% of its homeless population, which means 40% of the homeless who were trying to get into the shelters couldn't do it. So that means you didn't have a bathroom, you didn't have a place to sleep, you didn't have a place to put down your things, you had nothing. And that was a night by night thing. You don't check into these shelters for a week at a time and do it every single day. So there'd be 3 or 4 days out of the week where I wouldn't have any place to go, a place to use the bathroom, a place to brush my teeth, which I guess that's a little bit easier to do anywhere, but still the point stands that you need a place to use these toiletries as well, for the most part, or at least some privacy, and many places just don't have that. So to say that homeless people don't want to get better is completely false, and I think it'd be a whole lot more true to say that most of them just don't know how. You know, they don't have the resources, and especially in a place like Minneapolis and Seattle too, that just didn't have resources for homeless. The closest detox that I could go to when I was in downtown Seattle, which I hope has changed now, but the closest one was in Tacoma, which is an hour south. And I mean, tell me how a homeless person without a car would get an hour south. It just makes no sense at all. So when you see people on the street, don't think that that's the life they're choosing. Think that they don't know how to get out of that situation, and that the overwhelming majority of them want to get out of it. Audrey Pine is in here. Hey, Audrey, what's up? Man, this is so awesome. You guys, I love you so much. Yeah, I would say that's a good point, Jane. I wouldn't say it's easy to compare, but I would agree with that, where she says that disability often gets looked on negatively too, where people would look down on them and say, well, they just don't want to work. But that would also be incredibly false for the vast majority of people who are on disability, who either can't work or don't know how to with their disability, and the resources are just incredibly slim. Teleportation, yeah. I can't even keep up with the chat. I miss so much. I'm sorry if I missed anything here. Barncrest says, I refuse to believe that this man has a name other than Mr. Puckett. And that's funny, because I think more people in the world definitely call me Mr. Puckett now than Abe or Abraham. And I've had a million nicknames in my life. I certainly have before Abe came around, but Mr. Puckett kind of took the cake, I guess, because it seems like just about everybody calls me that, except for maybe Z-Heart and my parents, who wouldn't be caught dead calling me that. I don't think they like the Mr. Puckett thing because they named me. They want me to go by my birth name, but shout out to my mom and dad, who are not here right now, but they'll be watching this video at a later date. How about look at the other questions here? Let's see what else we got. I can't believe some of you have been here for an entire hour. This is the most unbelievable thing. Oh man. Next time I do this, I'm gonna record myself beforehand, and just to show you how nervous I was, and then to sit down and have all these people here is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right. Let's get another question off of Twitter. And this one is, if any of your followers could help you right now, what could they do to help you? Oh, if people, that's a question I asked actually in my Dear Nashville, What is Happiness video. I think a lot of them ended up on the editing room floor and didn't get in there, but if your community could help you, how would they help you? You know, I guess I've already talked about there's really only one thing that I've been worried about, and that's the financial insecurity. So maybe if there are people out there who have either leads on a position that I could work, or maybe they have a job they love and there might be some openings there. Maybe that's something that people could keep in mind for me. Beyond that, I don't know if I really need a lot. I love my little studio here. I love Nashville. I would love to stay here for a very long time if I can make that happen with employment. So besides that, I'm not really struggling with anything that people can help with. I have my mental challenges every day. I have my chronic fatigue syndrome every day, but I deal with that in the best way that I know how, and I don't think that really involves other people. So I guess if I could say anything else to that, I would keep showing up, man. Keep showing up to these videos. Just keep showing up. It's tough to go from a platform where I was getting millions of views a week, and I really took them for granted. I think I did after a while, you know, going 500 plus posts where every single one of them went viral. I think I really took that for granted towards the end there, where I was just like, I didn't think about it. I just put a post out and then I'd go again and set an alarm for 3 hours and 40 minutes later and watch it viral. Like there wasn't even a thought in my head that it wouldn't go. So it's an interesting transition to go to somewhere like YouTube. And I understand that an Imager post and a YouTube video do entirely different things, but to go to something like this and to average, you know, about 1,000 views per, it's made me appreciate the views so much more and appreciate the people that show up so much more, because they're taking so much more time out of their day to do so as well. I can see the metrics on YouTube and how long people are watching these videos, and sure, a lot of people will just scroll right through them, so I have a lot more views than I do watch time, but to have people that sit down and watch the videos and then interact with them through the comments, I appreciate so much more than I did on Imager, where I was taking it all for granted. So keep showing it up, and also critique them. You know, if you have something you want to see do, let me know about it. Or if there's something in the video that you don't like, right now I can see it's a little uneven. You can tell up here it's not set up perfectly. I mean, even little things like that. If you have suggestions on how these could be better or more enjoyable for you, just let me know. Because sometimes with YouTube here, I feel a whole lot more, on this side of it, I feel a lot more alone making them, which is, in essence, it can be a good thing because I'm the sole creator of the videos, but I love to have more input than I've really gotten. Now, so many of you comment on the videos and say, I love this, or nice work, and that, keep doing that. That makes me feel good, man. But if you have actual critiques or something you want to see me do, I would also love to hear that, and that'd be very helpful just to see what the audience wants. Because sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I don't know what you guys want to see, and sometimes I feel like you're tuning in just because it's me, and just to support me because you're such amazing people. But that makes me question if you're actually digging the videos, or if you're just, you know, tuning in because it's an incredibly nice thing to do. So communication about the videos is probably what I would say about that. Good night, Audrey. Thank you for coming. Warren, what do you mean the positivity video? Like the one where I interviewed people just this past Monday? That one was a ton of fun to make, because I feel like it was more work, but it's a different kind, because I didn't go out into the community to interview these people. I sent, you know, these people all over the country my questions, and then they videoed themselves and got it back to me, which was a new challenge all in itself. The audio was terrible, the lighting, and yeah, it was a lot of new challenges. But sometimes the only thing I look at are just the view counts of the video, and I know maybe that's not the right thing to do, but I look at that video, which had probably the least amount of views of anything I had ever put out, and I think that maybe people didn't like it, whereas it could just be totally random, you know? And it really is, because if there's, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 people who will watch them, you never know if you know, 1,000 people just missed and forgot about it, or if they just didn't show up because they didn't want to see them. So it's difficult to look at the metrics and see if people enjoyed them, or to say, well, that one only got 700 views, so people must have really hated that video and just never do it again. So without feedback, it's pretty impossible to tell, and all I really have are those metrics. Alex asked, let's see, have you heard from any of the people you helped on Imager since you've helped them? I remember some charity drives going very well a few years ago on Imager. Yeah, especially the teacher ones. So pretty much every teacher supply drive, and I think over a year and a half, a 2-year period, I did 7, where we had either low-income classrooms or classrooms that just did not, low-income classrooms would be a good way to put it, where we just pumped them full of supplies. You know, I would just put a post out and say, make an Amazon wish list and say, hey, anybody who can afford it, send a box full of supplies to this Amazon wish list. And those always were so easy, and every single one of them had bought every single thing off of the wish list, and they were so successful. Of those 7, I think 5 of those women are Facebook friends with me right now. So I've stayed in touch with them, which is nice, especially the ones right here in Nashville, which has been really nice. I haven't met them in person or anything, but we stay in touch. They comment positive stuff on my Facebook page, and it's been really cute. But besides that, most of the people, or most of the supply drives and fundraisers that I did through Imager, if it was helping an Imagerian, I hadn't really heard of them. I think the core group of people, there was what do we have, 4,000 people I think in the subreddit, and they've all been amazing over there on Reddit, and then about the same amount of people over on Twitter. So it's an incredibly small group compared to how vast it used to be. But this incredibly small group, like you here today, are so much more amazing and so much more committed to not only doing good things but progressing and having these conversations about feeling better, about waking up in the morning and how do I feel better throughout the day, or how can I help my community. Or I think a lot of it on Imager was just people who don't normally go through that, or might not normally do those kind of supply drives or fundraisers, but just that specific week happen to have a couple of extra dollars and go through with it. So it's a lot different not being on there, because that was just so random. The people that would show up to see it, 150,000 people that would see a post, there might have been a third of those who hadn't even heard of Mr. Puckett yet, as compared to now the people that follow me obviously know who I am and know what I'm about. So it is a lot different for sure. Bye, Jane. Thank you for stopping by. Off the job subject, James asked, have you considered starting a small charitable foundation with your followers and taking a small salary from it? No, and for no other reason than I wouldn't know anything about it. Now, there is somebody that contacted me, somebody I met on Imager who is now a Facebook friend, but we actually chat quite a bit, who's talking about doing a nonprofit, and I would love to be involved and create something. Hers was for rent, was for people getting evicted, especially now in the time of COVID, and making a nonprofit for helping those people stay in their apartments. And that's certainly something I'd want to get involved with. But I mean, 501c3s, I have no knowledge in that area whatsoever. So I wouldn't even know where to start. I feel like I'd have to take a class or get hooked up with somebody who's done it before, because I wouldn't have any idea what to do. But I would love to do, especially with the free pizza dude, because that's such a silly and fun thing. But I would love to make that idea be official and have a way to get people food sustainably and do it the right way. The free pizza dude to me is just this kind of silly project where we're able to have fun and help people for one day. But if we could set up a small nonprofit or a charity and be able to get these people groceries on a regular basis, we could help so many more people for so much longer than one day. But I just have no idea, even where to start. So I would love to. Maybe someday when I figure it out. That's a good question. Bardcrest wants to know. Bardcrest wants to know, cremated or buried? Definitely cremated, although there are some new, very interesting ways to go about that. And that is, you can have these urns that don't quote me on this. I saw a TED Talk about it 3 years ago, and it was something like, these urns are made out of this fungus so that you can bury the urn of the cremated ashes, and it will soon grow into a tree. The only issue I really have with being buried is putting all those chemicals into your body and putting your body into the earth is the only issue I really have with that. Although my parents did buy a funeral plot for me, which is a little morbid, I know, but they want the whole Switter family to be buried together up in Wisconsin, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So I know what my parents want, but we'll see what actually happens. Jeffrey asks, what's part of my story that I want to share but does not come up a lot? Oh man, I share so much of my life through all those posts that I've done and through these videos. The only one I could really think of was the speech and everything with Al Sharpton, which I've already talked about in this video. And then I guess jail too, which I never talked about much until recently in these videos. a part of my story that I want to share but doesn't come up enough. I don't have one, I guess, and I think that's less me blanking on the spot and more a testament to how much that we've talked about, not only through these YouTube videos but also on Imager, to where I've really talked about so many aspects of my journey, being homeless, and before then, and there's this interesting gap, I guess, that I don't talk about a lot. That's from 17 to 28. I moved all over the country. I was always moving every 9 months and doing different drugs, whether it was meth here or crack there or opiates there, until I finally settled on alcohol, and that was my end stage. Once I started hitting alcohol hard, that just ruined my entire life, which wasn't that great anyway. But it's this weird time where I was out having fun, and I don't talk about that a lot because I was out, using opiates and going to parties, smoking meth with large groups of people, doing these crazy things, hitchhiking across country, which I did when I was 17 years old. And it's hard to talk about now. It's hard to talk about the good times. I feel like I have a much easier time talking about all of the terrible parts of my life with drugs and alcohol, because from that 17 to 28, I had so many good times. But I feel like if I'm going to discuss those, then I might influence somebody to do something like that. Like, he dropped acid and climbed one of the highest mountains in America. That sounds like fun. I want to do that. That's not a story I want to tell, because I don't want to influence somebody else to do that. So I guess the stories that I keep to myself, I think I do for good reason, especially during that kind of 11-year period where I was definitely addicted, but I was still a functioning addict, and could still go to work and have a friend group to a certain extent, but everything I did was still controlled by drugs and alcohol. And then when I was around 28 is when it started, when I would wake up and drink. And that's when it all went downhill. And it started with just a couple of shots, but then it soon grew to 7 shots in the morning, and then, another 10 before lunch, and then before too long, it was 55 to 65 before the day was over. So I don't like to talk about the good times with drugs and alcohol, I guess would be my answer to that. Every time, this is super cute. Every time somebody swears in the chat, it gives me this big thing that says, "Do you want to hide this message or do you want to allow it?" That's funny. You guys are perfectly allowed to swear. That's awesome. Mr. Puckett the dog, was he cremated? Bard Chris asked, and yes, he was cremated. Paid a lot to get this little urn thing, and I felt like I was blacked out during that whole thing. I don't know what happened that day, but yeah, I cremated him. I still have him because I don't know what the heck to do with his ashes. I think I thought I'd be attached to them. I think I thought it would mean something to me, but it doesn't. It's just this box, and it means absolutely nothing to me. And I hate saying that because it's right there, and I still have a collar too, but it means absolutely nothing to me. So maybe that'll help somebody save a few dollars. I don't know if their pet ever dies, but people have suggested that I do something with it instead of keep home. So if I ever make it back to Seattle and go to some of these mountains that we climbed and ran and loved so much, to spread them there, maybe that could be something a little more significant than just having this box sitting on my mantle doing nothing, where I take a lot more joy out of all the artwork I have of him and the more visual cues rather than just what's in the box, what's in the box. So let's see, what else do we have in the chat? JD wants to ask if I still attend AA meetings, and no, I don't. I talked about that a little bit 2 videos ago, and asked Mr. Puckett anything, that I attended over 1,000 AA meetings when I was trying to get sober. But there are certain reasons that I don't that it didn't work well for me. And that's not, I hope I don't discourage anybody, because there are so many different routes to getting sober. There's smart recovery. There's so many different things you can do besides AA, but AA's probably worked for the most people across the world, especially if you put NA in there, which for anybody that doesn't know, AA and NA are essentially the exact same program. It's the same 12 steps and everything, just drugs, people who use drugs will generally go to one, and people who use alcohol will generally go to one, but they're interchangeable by all means. And that, I felt like, held me back at certain points in my recovery going to AA. So when I got sober this time, it's an interesting story, because I almost feel a little guilty how I got sober. I didn't go to rehab this time. You know, I'm almost 3 years now, and at the start of this recovery journey, I didn't go to rehab. It was actually when I was in jail. And I'd been to a dozen rehabs and psych wards and everything, but this time I had gone to jail, and I stayed there for a couple of months, and that was the start to my recovery journey. But I had every intention of getting out of jail and going to get a bottle. Like, every day I was there, it was all I could think about. And you know, we made alcohol when I was in jail, but we always got caught before it was done, so we never had the finished product. But then I left jail with a couple of months of sobriety, and I got picked up by my sister. And it was at that point that everything changed for me. My father had family way in the deep South, family I had never met before, his brothers and sisters. He had 17 brothers and sisters. I mean, can you imagine the size of that family? But I hadn't met most of them because we lived across country from them, and he didn't visit very much. But there were a group of that family, cousins, aunts, uncles, and everything, who took me in, who heard my story and said, well, just bring them down here and we'll take care of them. And they lived in the middle of nowhere. Dude, it's this town of 1,000 people, and there's nothing there. It's a dry county surrounded by dry counties. So even if I wanted to run and get a drink, it would have taken me 2 days to get somewhere to do that. And it was the most boring time of my entire life, and it's exactly what I needed. The most boring time of my entire life. It was the most Southern family thing. Like, they spent every second together, and they'd sit out and like one person like whittled wood, and it's like the most boring thing in the world. But again, it's exactly what I needed, was just to calm down. I had a roof over my head finally. I didn't have to worry about my next meal finally, or shelter. Mr. Puckett, the dog, was there, thank God. And it was kind of the first time that I had shelter, love, food, and sobriety. And that was just my launching off point. And after like a short time of that, it was like, I'm never looking back again. And certainly I've been close to relapsing, especially Mr. Puckett died, and many other times, but that's exactly what I needed at that time to be able to start this recovery journey that now is almost 3 years long. And I hope I never look back at all. So they were a huge part of that. And yeah, I sometimes feel guilty because I feel like I didn't do it myself. You know, I didn't go to rehab and work the steps and work on myself. I got thrown in a cage for 3 months where I couldn't drink. And then I got put in this cottage with all these people I'd never met for another 3 months. And I feel like I owe them everything. I do. And I maybe have not been as grateful as I should have been because I haven't been in constant contact with them. But they were everything to me at the time. To think that people that had never met me would take me in like that and just give the entire world to me, well, was pretty amazing. So after that, I moved back to Minneapolis. I started working a job finally after 6 months of recovery. It was this terrible job. I was in downtown Minneapolis working at a gas station overnight, and it was just the worst. It was the absolute worst, but it allowed me to save up some money. It allowed me to kind of get myself back into a work mode so I could be a contributing member of society again. So even that part, which I hated, contributed a lot to where I am today. So I think that's what I'm grateful for now, is the mindset to be able to look back at all these things that while I was going through them, I thought they were terrible, but without them, I probably would have used again and would still be in, the rehab system or homeless, and not one of you would have ever heard of me. So you have to appreciate every little step along the way, even if it didn't seem like it was great at the time, because it all led you to where you are today. Shepard, I'm going to keep that one edited, buddy. I'm going to leave that one out. Oh, Circle Strafe is in here. That is awesome. If you guys don't know, it's one of my favorite YouTube channels. Aspect History. I'll put it in the Discord server after this. He runs it. It's an amazing channel. They put so much work. I have no idea how they make these videos, dude. I don't know how they do it, but they're amazing. I was able to be a guest voice on there a couple of weeks ago, and it's fantastic. Thanks for showing up, Circle Strafe. That's awesome. That's a good point, Larry, that the 12 steps don't work for everyone, but you still hear me talk about them in almost every video. So it's not to say that I just tried them and threw them away, because I took so much from them. And I think that's an important lesson, that progress isn't linear. Progress doesn't look like this. Progress is back and forth and up and down. And if you take little parts of it each time, it'll help you in the long run. So let's say the first time I went to rehab, I failed miserably, and I got caught drinking there, and I got kicked out. But that time before I was drinking wasn't all for naught. It wasn't wasted time, because that then added to the next time I was in rehab, and then the next time, and then the next time, and then eventually I had enough knowledge, enough know-how, and enough ambition to finally tackle the issue I had. So I would never discourage somebody going to a 12-step group, because I took so much from them. It's just not something, a program as a whole, that is really what got me sober. But I love talking about the steps, especially the steps of action, because in that there are only a couple, and that's 4, 5, and 9, which is, writing out your resentments, which we spoke about, going back and seeing your steps and what the mistakes you made in those resentments. And then the 9th step, which is probably the most important of all, making amends to the people you've wronged. And something that is a lifetime thing. I haven't done that for everybody yet, because it's practically every person I met from age 17 to 28 I need to do amends for, because I did something wrong to them on whatever level it was. So that's a lifelong thing that I'll never, I hope I'll get through, but maybe never really be finished with, because there's still people to this day that I probably do wrong. And it won't be till I do their 4th step that I realize my action that caused some of that. So I try to be a whole lot less confrontational now than I used to be, that's for sure. But you're still going to step on toes no matter what you do. There are people out there who don't like Mr. Puckett. There are people out there who might even hate me as Mr. Puckett, and there might be something that I did to contribute to that I don't even know. So we're all a work in progress. You're never done. You're never like, this is who I'm going to be forever. No, I'm going to keep progressing forever. Or until my life ends, of course, but you're just going to keep going bigger and bigger and bigger. Just don't stop. Never settle for what you are, because you can be so much more in the long run. Hey, Worldwide Darts, thanks for coming, man. That's awesome. All right, Mike asks, Kristen, a place worse than Colombia. Colombia, that's funny. Colombia is where I lived when Mr. Puckett died. And Kristen, probably nobody else in this chat will know what place I was talking about, so I can tell you it was Waynesboro, which I think is worse than Colombia. That's funny. Mike Frost asks, since everyone calls you Mr. Puckett, are you proud to always be attached to that name? Or do you think you'd ever want to branch out to become a remade identity? No, I'm proud of Mr. Puckett. I don't have anything, obviously what happened at Imager was unfortunate, and the doxing and harassment still lives on to this day on platforms. I'm surprised it hasn't happened in this chat. I'm surprised that he's not here yet in this chat. So that's unfortunate that you can do things like search Mr. Puckett in Reddit, for instance, or on Google, and if you look far enough, you'll eventually see things written by this person, and that's unfortunate. But everything I've done as Mr. Puckett, I'm super proud of. I can't think of something that I've done using this name that I regret, and that's a big deal for me, because I regret just about everything I did before I was Mr. Puckett. So that's a big deal for me to feel pride, in Mr. Puckett, and to know that when people think of that, at least I hope when people think of that, they think of a positive image and not a negative one, like I so often associate with my past. That's a good question. Let's see. What is your current job? So that's something that I've never really talked about in real time. I guess I feel like that's the last part of my personality that I've been able to keep to myself. The last part of my life that isn't out there on the internet because every other part of my life is, and I like that. I'm cool with that, but so I'll be a little vague here, but I'm doing that on purpose. I'm doing some digital marketing right now for, I'll call it an investment company. And that sounds a lot cooler than what it actually is. I mean, what I really do is promote things on social media. And that's not as Mr. Puckett. You never see promote anything as that. It's using their accounts to promote things and work. And it's a pretty radical job, to be honest with you, but I'm talking working like 15 hours a week, and it's a commission-based job. So it's just not a financially viable thing to do as much as it is kind of a fun thing to be able to keep myself afloat and to, buy organic kale instead of regular kale. So for now, it's good, and I hope I do find a job that I can work and be proud of and still keep my current part-time job. That's the goal in the long run. Let's see. Oh, I'm way behind in chat. Look at you guys go. Holy Toledo. I'm going to miss so much. If I missed your question, I'm sorry. I'm missing so much here. Why Jeff over Skippy? How did you know? How did you know? I am a peanut butter connoisseur. There is nothing better in life than a jar of peanut butter and a spoon. And if you can picture a 16-ounce jar of peanut butter, which is probably the most commonly sold, I go through at least one of those a day. And that's not on bread, that's not spreading on toast or whatever, that's just straight out of the jar. So peanut butter is where I get my most fat from. Being a vegetarian, sometimes I struggle to get enough fat in my diet, which can be an unhealthy thing for all the running I do. So I've tried all the nut butters in the world, whether that's cashew or hazelnut or whatever, and my absolute favorite is not just Jif, but it is the all-natural version of Jif. And then to go even further, it's the low sodium version. Now, I really don't give two chickens about if it's low sodium or all natural. This is just the one that tastes the best for me, and you won't probably find it in any store. So Amazon will sell the 64-ounce jugs in an 8-pack crate, and that's what I order, and go through it way more than I should, but it's just the most delicious thing in the world. I love it. Definitely Jif. Skippy, I don't like Skippy at all. Mountain dulcimer, yes, this is a mountain dulcimer. Somebody from Imager actually sent that to me. It's amazing. I have no idea what to do with it, but even if I wanted to show you how it's played right now, I couldn't because they sent it to me with no strings. So at a certain point, I'm going to need to go to a guitar center and hop in an Uber or something and pay me to string it up for me, because the dulcimer is not even strung at this point. And I hope to string it up someday. I'm sure I could pick a little bit on it, but I would have to take some lessons to actually be good enough to probably put it on YouTube. But for now, it's just a beautiful piece, and I think more than anything, it just reminds me of all the kindness that I've received, because I didn't ask for it. Just somebody sent that to me because they wanted to make me happy, and it was a really special moment. Fries or onion rings? Fries. I'm a big fry dude, for sure. Big fry dude, yep. Big fry. I love onions. It's probably my favorite cooked vegetable, but you're going to compare them to fries. I mean, come on. I love French fries. Or do we call them freedom fries? That was trending on Twitter today, I think. We'll call them French fries. Niels asks, so what are some new things you want to talk about? We all know about your past, but what are you looking forward to? You know, I talked about the video 2 weeks ago how I'm a little more scared for the future than I am excited for it, because there's so much that's unknown, especially for me right now. Knowing if I'll stay in Nashville, knowing, you know, if I'll find adequate work and all of that. I think my goal would be to do something with dogs. Since I was even a teenager, I always wanted to own a piece of land. Think of it as a farm, but instead of farming the animals, we're homing the animals there. So it could be a dog rescue where it could be worked like a shelter, you know, where people could bring their dogs there and surrender, and people could go there to adopt dogs, but instead of living in cages, they're out in open fields and running around and having a great time, and it's me taking care of all of them. It would be an amazing thing to get into, or again, working nonprofit to help homeless all over the country. now, I need a lot of work to even start either of those projects because I don't know where to start. And when you look at something like that, for me anyway, it seems like such a big task that I just keep putting it on the back burner because I don't know where to start instead of, going to take a night class on nonprofits or, reading a book or connecting with people on Discord on how to do it, because sometimes some of these actions seem way too big for us to handle, even though they're not. So we just push them and push them back and push them back. So that might be a good thing for me to get into now, especially since I'm not working, to start thinking a little bit more about my future, because I never have before. In my addiction, it was always about today. It was always about getting the fix today, and that was it. When I wake up tomorrow, I'll figure out another way to get a fix, and the next day I'll figure out a way to get another fix. And sobriety was the same way. It's one day at a time, right? I will find out today, or I will today stay sober, and I'll worry about tomorrow. And it's kind of been that almost 3 years now, but I'm starting to get so comfortable in my recovery that I don't necessarily need to take it one day at a time, and I can start look towards the future without being scared, but I still am scared because I see nothing in the future. So I think that would be something for me to someday go to school. I never did go to college. I never did do that. I never got specialized training in anything because after high school, I just started hitchhiking, and then I just kept traveling and kept doing drugs until everything just came to a T 3 years ago. So I feel like now is a time where I could actually start my life and have a future. But it seems like such a big deal. I don't know where to start, and certainly can't afford tuition or specialized training of any sort. So it's a weird position to be in, to want to look forward but not know what the heck I'm looking at. That's a really good question that I hope to be able to answer soon. Kristen wants me to pet Mrs. Puckett's belly. Yeah, that is her everything. She would. We can be on mile 13 of a run, and I can just stop and barely touch her underbelly. We'll be in the middle of downtown Nashville, and she will roll over on her back. This is everything she wants out of life, is to get a belly rub. So yes, I can definitely do that. Thanks, Ryan. I'd appreciate you stopping by, man. That's awesome. Circle Strafe, we talked about my favorite pizza right at the start of it was pesto base. It has to be. One side has tomatoes, one side has pineapples, and then the whole thing has spinach and onions. Very specific, but pesto is the most key part of that because it's incredibly hard to find. Oh gosh, how are you feeling about the Twitter Pizza Day? Hey, Logan, thanks for coming. Hey, if you guys don't know Logan in the chat, he is now the free pizza dude on Imager. He took over everything for me. He's running the account, he's running the PayPal, he's running everything, and they're killing it over there without me. And you know what I'm most excited for, Logan? Not the free pizza dude that I'm doing on Twitter, but I'm excited to help you guys tomorrow because the Free Pizza Angels on Imager are about to send their 300th grocery order. So I'm going to hope to be on Imager tomorrow and watch for that. Or maybe Logan, you can help me do that. Let me know when somebody comes on and requests groceries, because I want to be the one to send and kind of mark that momentous occasion, I guess. Whereas on Twitter, we had some problems last week in the Free Pizza Dude, and maybe the problem is the bad word, but we sent out 8 pizzas in a 7-hour period. So it was just like we just didn't have requests, and the thing got seen by 8,000 people, I think. So I wasn't sure if it was people just questioning the legitimacy of the whole thing, or if we were lucky enough that just people who saw it didn't need food. But it was such a slow grind out day. I set out 7 hours where I was just going to sit here and send food all day. That's what I do. But I sat here and did nothing because we sent 8 pizzas. I mean, there was it took me 30 minutes to send that out, and then there was 6.5 hours of me doing nothing. So I'm not really excited for the Twitter Pizza Day. I guess all I can say is I just hope it blows up. I hope people see it and we can send out 100 pizzas and help more people than we did last week. Joshua asks, so Abe, why don't you have a friend? I'm not sure what you mean by that, if you mean a girlfriend or why don't I have a large group of friends. I touched on the girlfriend part in a video 2 weeks ago. But why I don't have a large group of friends, that's all on me, and that's the traveling I've done. I mean, I'd stay in a place for 9 months, I'd get to know people, I'd say goodbye to them, and then I'd never see them again. So all these people are on my Facebook, and I think maybe they'd be there for me if I ever needed them, but they're not people I see or talk to even on a yearly basis. But why I moved to Nashville was because I had two friends here. You know, I was in Columbia, well south of here, and didn't know anybody. And then I met Z Hart on Imager. Her and her husband came down to visit me, and they're just the most amazing people in the world. They decided to move to Nashville. So I just kind of dropped my plans of moving to Seattle and said, I'm going to go move to Nashville just so I can be close to these two people. And it's been the best decision I've ever made. Just because if I ever need anything, I have two friends now where in the past 4 or 5 years, I didn't have that. I was all alone in the city, especially in my addiction, but even in my sobriety, just being all alone and not knowing anybody. Whereas now, they take care of me pretty well. I mean, they cook for me. They do everything for me. You can't even imagine when the Nashville bombing happened and I lost all my internet. They were out of town. They let me stay at their place. I feel like if I ever need anything, I can call them. And I haven't had people like that in my life in the better part of it. So they're the best friends that anybody could ask for. Let's see here. Zara wants to know, did I meet anyone famous in Alcoholics Anonymous? No, I didn't. And I went to some really specific AAs. I didn't really get into the real normal groups. I've always had a problem with God. I think might be a respectful way to put it. So that was one of my biggest problems in there too, in surrendering to a higher being. So I went to very specialized AA groups. I mean, in Seattle, I went to what we called Quad A, which was Atheists and Agnostics, Alcoholics Anonymous, and these very specific groups that, you know, you would get the same set of people that would go to them instead of these large groups where you might see different people all the time or even famous people in big cities. Those I didn't often go to. So no famous people in AA, although I guess if I did see somebody famous in AA, I really shouldn't talk about it because it's anonymous. So, but honestly, I never did. So we can say that. Lonnie wants a link for Circle Strafe. We'll see if we get there. Again, it's Aspect History. So try that again. They also have an Imager account now where they're kind of uploading similar type stuff and able to promote the YouTube at the same time under the same name, Aspect History. You can always send me a message on Twitter, Discord, or Reddit too, and I'll shoot you a link there. All right. Jen, bring up an interesting point. I've heard of programs with animals for inmates. Do you think caring for animals in some way would be a good addition to addiction programs? That is really the point. And I didn't go into this very much with the dog shelter idea, but that's the whole thing, because that, as much as I loved Mr. Puckett the dog, there was nobody that held me back from recovery more than he did. Now, that's not his fault. It's just because no recovery center would allow me to bring him there. No sober house would allow me to have him. No shelter would allow me to have him. So I spent so many days, weeks, and months not getting help and just sleeping on the street because I had to be next to Mr. Puckett. And I had nowhere to send him. You know, I wasn't going to send him to a shelter and let him get adopted by somebody else. So that is a big disconnect, especially with people on the street who want so badly to get better, but all they have in the world is their dog. So if you're saying you have to give up that dog to be able to go to rehab and hope it works out for you, and even if it does or doesn't, you know, you go back on the street and now you don't have a dog, that choice is pretty clear for most people, that you stay with the dog. So that is definitely something I'd want to focus on if I had an organization or nonprofit, and especially a shelter, would be a place where people who were either going into rehab or going into jail could safely leave their animal to be taken care of, and they could pick them up at any later date whenever the heck they wanted, whether that was a couple of months, like I was in jail, or years and years down the line. That is such a huge deal for people on the street getting into the help they need, is if they have a dog. So that is a very awesome point to bring up, and something I want to be involved with one way or another, whether that's having an organization or even just being a website, and saying, because most people do have mobile devices. I had a cell phone when I was on the street, and most people did too. You can go to Starbucks and get free Wi-Fi, even if you don't have a plan. To have a website connects people who want to get into rehab or who are about to go to jail with people who will foster those dogs. And I just think that would be such an amazing gap to bridge, because it was such a huge influence on my life, and it kept me sick for years longer than it really should have, because I had no place to put my dog. That's an excellent point. Kaylee asks how I'm doing. I'm doing pretty good. I'm way less nervous now than I was at the start. I actually feel like I'm talking to you guys instead of just talking to my phone. So I am doing very well. This feels good. All right, James B asks, would you consider yourself a journey or a destination person? What a question that is. How did I not ask that on any of my interviews for the YouTube video? That's better than any question I asked. Would I consider myself a journey or destination person? And that has two different answers. Right now, by all means, it's the journey. But that is both positive and negative, because I don't have a destination right now. I feel like I'm not building up to something. I feel like I don't have much to look forward to, as sad as that is. And I love every day. I do. There's something I love in every day, the running, and I mean, to hang out with these dogs every day, and it's just amazing. But there's nothing like down the line that I'm looking forward to. I'm not saving up to buy a house, or a car, or to have a family or anything like that. Like, the future to me, when I look at 2025, this is what I see in my head, which is right here, which is no progress at all. So I am a journey person, but I think that's just because I don't have a destination. But it's also important. I mean, we had somebody in the last video talk about the pursuit of happiness, that you're pursuing something and you can't negate that experience. You have to appreciate the journey, because otherwise the destination is just going to be another stepping stone in that journey. So that's an interesting question. And even if you have a destination that you're fighting for and you're trying to get there, what? I mean, do you have a journey after it? The journey is the entire life with stepping stones in between. And if that's the truth, then I guess the destination is just the end of life, which is a sad thing to say. So I'm definitely more of a journey person than a destination person. Good question. All right. We have Bard Crest, Mr. Circle Strafe. Hey, Circle Strafe, somebody wanted your YouTube link. You should put it in the chat. Said, have you thought about running some kind of fundraiser? I'm not sure for what, but that is something that I mentioned earlier in the video, that I feel a little guilty that I haven't done something, that I haven't done that. I haven't done anything to help people since I left Imager. And I feel like I don't know who to help too. We've helped a couple of schools here and the homeless shelter here, and it's a little difficult knowing who to help when I don't have all of these people in my inbox asking for help. And that's really what it was on Imager, was just hundreds of people a week that were DMing me and asking me for help for one thing or another. Josh, did I skip you? I don't even know what you asked, man. Well, feel like I missed a lot in the chat, but that's okay. DRN asks, what is the most immediate need that you wish fulfilled, and how can we help donate it? What is the most immediate need that you wish fulfilled? I'm not sure if you mean for me or for like the entire world put together there. Joshua says, get a friend. I don't know if you're talking to me, but I think I have a couple. You guys have been here the whole time. I'm going to call each and every one of you my friend now and stop saying that I only have 2 friends because you guys have been so kind to be here. Answer for both. So the most immediate need that I have that I wish fulfilled, I think I've already answered that, to be honest with you, and that's probably the job. Because with that covers every other immediate need. I mean, I could sit here and complain about my rent or my food situation and all that, but all of that kind of ties into employment, right? Or into finances, which is definitely something I've been struggling with. And I've had people say that like I should go the Patreon route, right? And like start a Patreon so people can donate and like make a bunch of private videos and writings that they can access. But I don't know. I feel like that kind of cheapens the whole experience. You know, if I were to say like to put out a Patreon and say you can pay to buy more content for me, I feel like that makes it a whole lot less raw and a whole lot less real if I'm benefiting financially off of it instead of just doing this because I want to. So it's an interesting concept. So I would definitely say employment-wise. Whereas if I'm looking for what the need of the world or maybe my community might be, my community is definitely homelessness, especially now. I mean, we have a storm tonight in Nashville. It's 25-degree wind chill, which is nothing compared to some of you out there in the northern part of the country. But the shelters here overflow at times too. So there are people even in my neighborhood that are sleeping on the sidewalk. I mean, in my neighborhood. So to find housing, I guess, probably be it. But we have these sky rises. You look in downtown Nashville in any of my pictures, we have cranes going up of these office buildings and these $7,000 a month apartments, but we don't have housing for the homeless. And it's a shame on local government. It's a shame on me. It's a shame on anybody who's not doing something to rectify the situation. So that would be the most immediate need, I think, in my community would be housing for people who don't have it currently. Let's see. Kaylee S., when do you reflect on your day? During your super epic runs or before you go to bed or any time in between? You know, my days are so simple. There's not a lot to reflect on. I live such a simple life without kids and without a lot of family here. And I mean, I've gone weeks and even a month without talking to another person face to face here. So I don't have a ton to reflect on, but it's usually at night. I'm usually that guy that will set the bedtime at midnight and then I'll lay in bed and think about all the stupid things I did the last couple of days until 4 a.m. and not get enough sleep. But usually I think my reflections are good, especially when I was helping people more. But now I just don't think my days are that interesting. Whereas maybe when I have a social situation, like I went out to eat with Z-Heart and her friend the other week, I'll come home and analyze every situation. Like, you know, oh, did I really say that? I wonder what they thought of me and kind of be insecure about that, you know, like, how did I come off and was I okay? Or did they think I was just some weird guy? So that's probably a little bit less introspection and a little bit more anxiety than anything, but it's always before bed and it usually keeps me up at night. All right, what else do we have here? But also on runs too. I mean, for the most part, running is when I can clear my head. That's the problem with the anxiety, is that the thoughts just don't stop. But when I run, I'm so hyper focused on my surroundings, right? Trying not to trip, making sure the dogs don't get hit by a car in downtown Nashville. And so hyper focused on everything around me that I feel like I don't have the mental capacity to think about things that would normally bring me anxiety, because I'm just focusing on what's around me, continuing to run and not getting hit by a car. So that's a better time for me to turn my brain off rather than actually think about things. This real strafe. Oh, Circle Strafe says you can do a financial support tier on Patreon where it's just got people to buy you coffee. That sounds a little bit like I can't remember, Fipsmeister and a couple of the giffers on Imager had one where you could essentially just buy them a coffee and send them like $2.50 at a time or something like that. So that sounds a little familiar. I appreciate that, Dan, who said he misses me on Imager. Thank you so much. I miss 99% of everything I did on Imager, without a doubt, 99%. Bard Chris asks, do I want to have kids? And I have always had the same answer for this, and it is an ultimately resounding no. I do not want kids at all. And there are times that I'll look at kids on TV, or like, I watch sports all the time, so maybe like Tom Brady and Drew Brees were playing with their kids on the football field last week, and I was like, man, I would be an awesome father. But I'm so irresponsible too, like, I'm so irresponsible, and I do not want kids, no. Now, that could all change if I were to meet somebody, because that's another, amount of responsibility and us interacting together, having a woman in my life. But as I have it right now, absolutely not. No children, but I could see myself maybe someday getting another dog. So I'll just throw that one out there for now. Thank you, Bear, who called me the GOAT. I appreciate it. And somebody suggested OnlyFans. That's funny. I've actually heard that before. Somebody hit me up on Twitter. It was on Twitter. I think they had seen something I had written on YouTube or maybe Reddit. I'm getting all these confused, but they saw me talk about my financial struggles, and they said that I should open up an OnlyFans. So I thought they were just joking, and I laughed and I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But then they said that evidently OnlyFans does more than just nudity, that they actually have created content by people. Now that remains to be seen if that's true or not. I've never opened the app, but that's what they told me. So maybe that will happen in the future. But no nudity. I will say that right off the bat. Kristen asked, what's my favorite place to go in Nashville? And it's this place called Shelby Bottoms. It's got to be one of the biggest parks in Nashville that has all your regular park attributes, baseball fields and all this stuff. But it has this place called Shelby Bottoms, which is a series of trails. And it's only 3 miles from downtown, but it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. And we run there almost every single day. If anybody's out there watching this in Nashville, go to Shelby Bottoms at noon. You'll probably see me there on a regular day. And it's just... there are people out there all the time, so you're not secluded from people, but you're secluded from the city, and it just feels like a different universe out there. I absolutely love it. Now, I moved here, and right after I did was the tornado, and then it was COVID. So I haven't really experienced a lot of indoor Nashville. So, the Grand Ole Opry or the Ryman Theater, I haven't done any of these historically, common things that people do when they come to Nashville, or even go to bars or like a concert. I haven't been to a concert since I've been here, or a Titans game. So COVID has changed a lot of that. And maybe my answer would be different had I been able to access some of these places, or at least felt safe accessing some of these places this year, which I haven't. So definitely would have to go with Shelby Bottoms, an outdoor oasis that seems 100 miles away from where it really is. An OnlyFans account with saucy Mrs. Puckett images. I like it. Kelly says, I would really like to be able to contribute to both your support and the things that you believe need supporting. How can I do that? I'm not sure if you mean charities and things like that. That's unfortunately something I've kind of gotten out of in the last 3 months, just because I haven't been as financially secure as I was last year, where I could really contribute, a small amount, but to anything I wanted, and to any GoFundMe I saw on Imager, I could contribute anything. Whereas now, the only thing I really have set up, we have the free pizza dude that people contribute to, which has also been really tough now on Twitter, starting brand right over. Because on Imager, we were established, everybody knew who the free pizza dude was on Imager, and our donation ran the show. Like, there was a full month where I wouldn't put our PayPal on those posts because we had too much money. Can you imagine that? We had too much money and we couldn't spend it. So we have the opposite problem now, where we did have one large donation. I don't know if he's out there watching, a man and his wife who donated an incredible amount. But besides that, it's been a struggle getting people on that. Again, I think that's just our namesake, that nobody on Twitter knows who the free pizza dude, that people see it. Is this really real? Is this an actual thing? But I think donation-wise, that's a good question, Kelly, because I think that's something I'd like to do for Puckett Day, which I talked about a little bit earlier on February 18th, is not only do something physical, like go out and everybody clean up their city, but also find a place to donate to and then promote it everywhere. Put it on Discord, Reddit, and Twitter, and see what we can do as a group again, because we did so much on Imager like that. I don't see why we can't do it now, even if it's on a much lesser scale. So I don't have a place currently where you can find something where I would be supported, but if you follow me on Twitter, that's probably where I'm the most active and where I will be doing a lot of the things for Puckett Day coming up. So that's a wonderful question. Thank you. John, do I have a favorite sports memory? Oh, yeah. Oh, man. How many? Now, I definitely have a sports mind. I can't tell you what I had for dinner 4 nights ago, but I can tell you how many catches Randy Moss had in 2006. Like, that's just how my mind works. My favorite memory, I always used to hate on the Patriots. For a lot of reasons that I won't get into. And the New England Patriots went 18-0 one year, and they made it to the Super Bowl. And they were playing the Giants, who I didn't care for, but I went out and got a Giants jersey, and a Giants hat, and a Giants koozie, and they're like one of the biggest underdogs in Super Bowl history, and the Giants went out and beat the Patriots to stop their perfect season, and they ended up going 18-1, and that's my favorite sports memory probably ever of my entire life, but also because I was with a huge group. It was probably my biggest group of friends of my life when I lived in Seattle in 2006, 2007. I just had a whole bunch of people there who really cared for me and who would have done anything for me, and vice versa. And I think that helps a lot with sports, because I still watch sports every day now. But it's a little different when you're all alone, right? Like, I'm not screaming at the TV. It's a little different now as compared to watching it with a group and having that camaraderie of watching sports and experiencing these moments together. Whereas now I just kind of watch and it happens, and then I go on with my life when it's done. So I'd definitely say the Giants beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl was the absolute best for me. So we said, God, no nudity. Naomi says, OnlyFans feet reveal? I mean, I hear there's good money in the feet game. I don't know, man. Mine are pretty gross, though. I don't take care of my feet. Buddhist Bassist asks, is the Temple of Athena worth a visit? Heck yeah. Now, I haven't been there since I was a child, actually. They've been doing some renovations to the outer facade of this, so I actually lived pretty close to that when I first moved to Nashville. It's basically I don't know if it's a inch-for-inch replica of Athena, but it's just this monster, like 30-foot tall Athena in this like Pantheon-type building right here in Nashville that I saw as a child, but haven't seen since I've been back. And I used to run by it all the time, so I could see the building, which just looks like, it's cut right out of Athens and put right here in Nashville. It's the weirdest thing, but I remember loving it as a child, and I can only imagine they're done with the construction now, or at least soon too. So I'd love to see it again, and I'd recommend anyone see it because it's just the weirdest thing, and I don't know why it's there, like why this slice of Athens is right here in Nashville. But it's fantastic, and it's well put together and taken care of for sure. And it's also in a park, so it's a place that I brought my dogs, and a place you can explore the grounds of, which is really fantastic too, that you can do things outside. All right. Joshua asks, would you rather have 1 minute conversation with your past self or a 1 minute conversation with your future self? Whoa, that's a question. Holy cow. Would I rather talk to my past self or my future self? It's weird because I have all these regrets of my past, right? Like, my past is just one big regret. I could break down them individually for you, or I could just say I did everything wrong from 14 to 27, 14 to 30, really. So there's part of me that wants to say I'd want to go back and talk to Abe in like 2006 and just shake him, right? And be like, bro, get your life on track. But there's something to be said about everything I went through made me who I am today. You know, if I didn't go through that addiction, if I didn't go through the homelessness and all those difficult years in that decade, everything I have now, because I don't have much. And maybe I'd still be living in my hometown too and just bored out of my mind instead of all of this experience I've had. So I think as